Hello everybody and welcome to this video on Matthew chapter 2. If you've already watched my other video on Matthew chapter 1, then that's great. If not, do check that one out too. So Matthew chapter 2 covers what traditionally many of us will know as the kind of Christmas story about the birth of Jesus, and it starts off with the visit of the Magi. So let's have a little look at the beginning. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." Well, there's so much in these couple of verses, isn't there? Jesus is born, King Herod is in charge, and let's start off with King Herod. The great thing about the Bible is that it does stand up to historical criticism. So King Herod is a real person, or was a real person. We know him to be true, and just for the fun of it, I actually put his Wikipedia page up here. But Herod the Great was a very famous ruler at the time, and one of the main things that he's famous for, as you can just about make out on the screen, is that he was a madman who murdered his own family and a great many rabbis. Now, this guy was a great builder, an architect, and he built some amazing places which you can still visit today. But he was also extremely jealous and paranoid, and he always thought people were trying to overthrow him. So much so that it got to the point where he had two of his children and his wife killed. He was just, bordering on a madman, really. He had the fear that when he died, nobody would mourn his death. So what he actually did, and what he decided to do was he said that when he died, all of his court officials should kill themselves too. So when he eventually did die, all of his court officials actually had the kind of brainwave, well, hang on, he's dead, so we don't have to enforce that. But like I say, King Herod, really, historical, proven to be a real king and a bit of a jealous and paranoid king who killed anyone he felt was trying to overthrow him. So obviously, it's not very good then to go to that king and say, "Oh, excuse me, we know that the King of the Jews has been born. Where can we find him?" So obviously, to the paranoid and jealous King Herod, that is going to cause some problems. The Magi are visiting. We think of them as the three wise men, but there's no talk of three wise men. But they came from the east, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, and they saw a star. There's been a lot of speculation about what the Star of Bethlehem could have been. We have the technology now to map out all of the star positions and planet positions in the sort of galaxy, and then to trace back historically and look at what the sky looked like at any time in history from any place in the world. I think this is technology that is in America, if I remember rightly, and they were able to map out what would the sky have looked like at this time and around this time in Bethlehem. And there is some speculation that three planets may have been sort of passing, Saturn and Jupiter, and the way they cross past each other could make this bright star and all the rest of it. But that's really speculation. If God wanted to just put a magical new star up in the sky, he could have done that as well. Or he might have used planets that were colliding past each other. But we just don't know. So verse 3, when King Herod heard this, he was disturbed. I mean, that's the understatement of the century, isn't it? He would have instantly thought, who is this person? I've got to get rid of them. And all Jerusalem with him. When he called together all the people's, sorry, just skip through this bit of the screen. When he called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Now this links back to what I said in the last video, but there are hundreds of prophecies in the Old Testament about where the Messiah will be, about things to do with the Messiah. One of them being that they will be born in Bethlehem. So those people who say, well, Jesus just faked all of these facts so that he could argue, and suggest he was the Messiah. You can't fake or force or plan where you're going to be born. And Jesus did meet this prophecy along with hundreds of others about the Messiah that we see in the Old Testament. So then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." We can surmise without much genius needed that Herod did not really want to worship him, but probably wanted to get rid of him. After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it and the star that they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. They opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh, extremely famous. We can only guess, that's pretty much what they look like. We can only guess of the reason they were given. One suggestion is that they had symbolic meaning. So the gold symbolized kingship, because Jesus was the king of the Jews. The frankincense symbolized how he would have a priestly role, and the myrrh symbolized his future death, because myrrh was used in embalming. Myrrh is quite interesting because it comes from commiphora trees, which originate from Arabia and some parts of Africa. So myrrh wasn't available in and around the area of Bethlehem, which would back up the idea that these guys came from the east. There are lots of other ideas about what gold, frankincense, and myrrh may have symbolized. They were given by one king. They were given as an offering to the god Apollo 300 or 400 years before the birth of Jesus. We have historical documents that show that these were offered as offerings to the god Apollo, and that kind of thing. So it wasn't it's not like necessarily something that would be a new idea. It wasn't like the wise men or the Magi would be thinking, what should we give? I know, let's give them this. It might have been a traditional thing to give to a god, but again, a lot of that is speculation. We can only really guess at it. So then we have, so we got up. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. So we saw the same thing in chapter 1. Joseph gets these dream visits from angels quite a bit. "Get up," he said, "take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." So again, here's an Old Testament prophecy that Jesus is fulfilling, again signaling that Matthew was written for a Jewish readership. The Jews did not believe that Jesus was the Son of God. Matthew is trying to show how many Old Testament prophecies Jesus fulfilled, therefore proving he is the Son of God. And of course, as we learned in the last video as well, the whole book is written in Hebrew, which is the language of the Jews. Verse 16, "When Herod realized he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious and gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in according with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more." Now, this is quite interesting. Herod thinks, okay, I'm taking no chances. If this child, this baby that's been born is the King of the Jews, the Messiah, the Son of God. I'm going to wipe him out now. I'm not going to wait for him to grow old and overthrow me. And what is quite interesting here, this was brought up to me by a girl in my RE class, is she said, well, sir, there is no historical account of Herod having all of these boys under 2 killed, is there? And she was right, there is no historical account. So we do have historical accounts of King Herod and a lot of the things he did, but not this. And you might think, well, that proves it didn't happen, but it's quite interesting to look at some of the statistics here. A census at the time showed that the population in Bethlehem was around 1,000 in this period, and it would be around 20 of those who were boys under the age of 2. So although we might picture the mass slaughter of hundreds of thousands of children, we're talking about 20. So that in itself is not a huge number, particularly considering how this period was so full of bloodshed. So as we saw earlier, he had his own children killed. The second thing, though, that is really significant is what we now know from historical documents about King Herod and the kind of person he was does match this kind of story here. So we know that because he was concerned he was going to be overthrown, he had 2 of his own children and his wife killed. That is historically proven in historical writings outside of the Bible. So it is not outside of the realms of likelihood that he would do the same with boys under the age of 2 in the town of Bethlehem. So it does match what we know about King Herod. Now, after Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who were trying to take the child's life are dead." So he got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judah in the place of his father Herod, so this is one of Herod's other sons, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. Now I just want to finish with this picture, because I think one of the things about Christianity is that people criticize it so much, but they don't actually know very much about it. And this picture summarizes this so beautifully, because this is the traditional nativity Christmas scene, or slightly the traditional one. I'm not sure that the shepherds were blue and green, but you get the idea. You've seen this kind of image a lot. But there's some interesting stuff in Matthew 2. Number 1, the Magi, it never told us how many there were. We always have 3, and I always think that's because at some time in the past a school was putting on a Christmas play, and they had 3 characters who had nothing to do. They said, well, you can be the Magi. So that's the first thing. There's no biblical mention of how many there were, but we always have 3. The second thing is we always think of them visiting and seeing Jesus in the manger. Well, there's no talk about putting Jesus in a manger anywhere in the Bible, which is also quite interesting. But the second thing is they didn't visit Jesus in the stable he was born in anyway. Because if you look at it, there are 2 things. In verse 11 it says, on coming to the house. So they actually visited Jesus in a house. And a little bit before it says they stopped over the place where the child was, not the baby. And when King Herod finds out how old the baby is by the stars and everything, he has all the children under the age of 2 killed. So putting all that together, we can suggest that actually Jesus is 1 or 2 by this time. And, Mary and Joseph have moved to a house for the time being. And that is when the Magi, and we don't know how many of them there are, visited him. So it's quite interesting, isn't it, just to look at that little detail and think, okay, well, actually, some of the things that you may have thought were true about the Christian faith and the Bible and the Bible stories are actually not. And I'd encourage you to continue watching this video series, whether you're doing RE or not, because you'll hopefully learn you will learn what the Bible does tell us about Jesus. So many people have misconceptions, preconceptions about Jesus, who he is, what the Bible says. But if you actually start to look at it, you'll often find that the things you thought were in there aren't. So I hope you found this video useful. Please do subscribe, and I'll see you again next week.